I stood there barefoot in my front yard, the morning dew still clinging to the grass, and watched the last wisps of smoke curl up from what used to be my pride and joy. My BBQ pit, 12 feet across, brick-lined, built by hand with a foundation deeper than most folks' patience, was gone. Nothing but a blackened scar in the earth and a few cracked bricks lying around like fallen soldiers. Across the street, Karen stood on her porch like a queen surveying conquered land. Sunglasses perched on her nose, mimosa in hand at 9:30 a.m., and that smug little smile she always wore when she got her way. She waved. That woman waved at me like she hadn't just burned down 30 years of tradition, smoke, and memories. My name's Frank Dalton, retired firefighter, Vietnam vet, born and raised in this town, same as my daddy and his daddy before him. I've lived on this same street for over 40 years, long enough to see kids grow up, trees come and go, and neighborly fences turn into HOA fortresses. But none of it prepared me for Karen. She moved in about 3 years back, California plates, 3 dogs that bark like they pay the mortgage, and an attitude like she was personally hired to civilize us rednecks. Didn't take her long to climb her way up to HOA president. First it was yard gnomes, band, then American flags had to be approved first. Next thing I knew, I was getting written up for having a rocking chair too close to the sidewalk. But what really got her goat was my BBQ pit. She called it a health risk, said it violated smoke emission standards, sent me 3 written warnings, then started slapping me with fines like she was passing out candy at a parade. $50 the first time, $75 the next, $150 after that. I paid him. I grumbled, but I paid him until last Tuesday. That's when I came home from the grocery store and found a demolition crew in my front yard. 3 fellows in hard hats and county-issued vests, knocking down my pit with sledgehammers like it was some condemned building. "Just following orders, sir," one of them said, without even looking me in the eye. I didn't yell, didn't raise my voice. I just stood there, holding a gallon of sweet tea in one hand, a carton of eggs in the other, and watched my legacy crumble. Karen stood across the street the whole time, chatting with her book club friends, not even pretending to feel bad. One of them said, loud enough for me to hear, "It really opens up the view, doesn't it?" That's when I knew. This wasn't about smoke. It wasn't about health codes. It wasn't about some HOA regulation dreamed up in a board meeting. It was personal. That pit wasn't just a place where I cooked. It was where my late wife Sarah and I spent our Sundays, where we hosted 4th of July potlucks, grilled up brisket for the church picnic, and taught our grandkids how to make proper s'mores. It was where half the neighborhood used to gather before Karen turned it into a police state with ferns. And now it was gone. But here's the thing about growing up old school. When someone kicks you down, you don't stay down. You dust off your jeans, you stand up, and you look them square in the eye. So I did just that. I looked at Karen, who was still laughing about something her friend said, and I smiled. Because what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't just some retired old man with a grill. I used to be the pit master for the Georgia Fire and Smoke team. Won state championships 3 years running. Got my name engraved on more trophies than she's got wine bottles in her fridge. She tore down my pit. Fine. But I still had my recipes, my smoker trailer, in storage, and more friends in the BBQ world than she had rules in that dusty HOA handbook of hers. She thought she ended something. But she just lit the fire. My daddy always said a man's gotta know what he's made of. Not just in the good times, but when the storm comes and tries to knock him flat. Well, storms come in all shapes and sizes. Mine came in the form of a clipboard-wielding HOA president with a grudge against smoked meat. But before all that nonsense, life was simple. I built that BBQ pit back in '92, right after Sarah and I paid off the house. Took me the better part of a month. Laid every brick by hand, lined it with fireproof mortar, and even carved our initials into the back corner. FD plus SD, forever under the smoke. It wasn't just for show. That pit earned us neighbors, friends, and more memories than I can count. Every summer, we'd host a 4th of July BBQ, kids running through sprinklers, adults passing around sweet corn and pulled pork, fireworks lighting up the Georgia sky. Sarah would hum Patsy Cline while basting ribs, and I'd man the coals like a ship captain steering into flavor. When Sarah passed 6 years ago this fall, something in me shut down. I kept the lawn trimmed, paid the bills, but the fire went out in more ways than one. That pit was the only thing I had left of her. And every Sunday since, I'd fire it up, grill a little something, pour 2 glasses of sweet tea, one for me, one for her, and sit under the oak tree out back. I wasn't trying to bother anyone. Never had noise complaints, no wild parties, not even country music past 9 p.m. But then Karen moved in. At first, I didn't pay her much mind. Figured she was one of those folks who moved down from the city looking for a slower pace. But within 6 months, she'd organized the HOA like it was some military operation. New rules started popping up like weeds in July. No wind chimes, no vegetable gardens in front yards. Grass had to be cut to exactly 2.5 inches. And my favorite, no visible outdoor cooking structures without prior approval. That one had my name written all over it. First, it was letters in the mailbox, printed out in fancy font with that little HOA seal at the top. Then came the warning signs. Folks from the board snapping pictures from their SUVs, one even pretending to walk her dog while filming my backyard. I tried to be civil, invited Karen to a community cookout. She didn't show. Sent her a Christmas brisket with a note that said, "Peace through pork." She returned it with a typed message. "We do not accept unsolicited meat products." I ain't ever heard anyone make brisket sound like a threat before. Then came the fines, one after another like clockwork. The notices said things like non-compliant outdoor structure, smoke hazard, unauthorized gatherings. Unauthorized gatherings? You'd think I was hosting biker rallies, and yet I took it on the chin. Figured if I laid low, they'd lose interest. Maybe they'd see that this wasn't about rules. It was about tradition, community, and honoring the woman I loved. But I underestimated Karen. She wasn't just enforcing rules. She was building an empire. She stacked the HOA board with her tennis buddies, started hosting exclusive wine tastings, and renamed the neighborhood Facebook group Cedar Ridge Serenity Circle. I knew things were getting serious when they blocked my email on the HOA listserv. I couldn't even vote on new proposals. They shut me out like I was a criminal for cooking meat in America. My neighbor Joe, a good man, Navy vet, been next door for 20 years, pulled me aside one afternoon. "She's gunning for you, Frank," he said, eyes low. "Wants to make you the example." I laughed it off, but something about the way he said it stuck with me. That night, I went out back, looked at the pit, and for the first time in 30 years, didn't light it, didn't feel right, didn't feel like home. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a BBQ pit. It was about control, about someone thinking they could erase what didn't fit their idea of clean living. But what Karen didn't know was that I wasn't alone. Behind closed doors, more neighbors were grumbling. Folks missed the smell of smoked ribs drifting down the block. They missed the potlucks, the laughter, the old ways. And I had something Karen didn't: history, heart, and a damn good brisket recipe. I thought the fines were the worst of it. I figured once they drained me of a few $100, they'd move on to someone else. Maybe the fellow down the street who painted his shutters burnt orange, or the couple with the garden gnome that played music at night. But I was wrong. Karen wasn't interested in rules. She was interested in domination. It started with a surprise inspection. 2 folks from the Neighborhood Clean Living Committee showed up at my door, clipboards in hand, cameras around their necks like they were tourists visiting a zoo. "Just a routine property evaluation," they said, not looking me in the eye. "We've had reports of improper material storage, potential pest attractants, and possible environmental violations." Environmental violations? They walked around my property like it was a crime scene. Took photos of my smoker trailer, my stack of hickory logs, even my old cooler sitting under the porch. The next day, I got a letter from the HOA stating my home was in provisional noncompliance, and that failure to remove hazardous outdoor equipment would result in legal action. Then they went after my utilities. A week later, I woke up to find the gas line to my outdoor kitchen had been shut off. I called the city, and they said the HOA had filed a complaint about an unauthorized connection. Took me 4 days and 2 plumbers to prove it had been permitted and legal for 20 years. But the real gut punch came the following Sunday. I just set up a small grill, nothing fancy, just a little charcoal Weber from back in the day, to cook some burgers for Joe and his grandkids. We weren't being loud, just enjoying the spring breeze, the smell of sizzling meat, and the sound of kids laughing. That's when the sheriff showed up. Karen had filed a noise complaint and reported me for open flame violations, citing HOA subsection 12C. The sheriff was polite, local guy, grew up 2 blocks over, but he said his hands were tied. I wasn't breaking any city laws, but the HOA had authority on private property rules. He gave me a warning and told me to cool it down for a while. That night, Joe and I sat in the dark, no lights out back, no grill, just the quiet hum of frogs and a sky full of stars. I didn't fight overseas to come home and get bullied off my own damn lawn, Joe muttered, taking a slow sip of beer. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to, because by then the community was starting to shift. See, for years, folks around here kept to themselves, waved politely, nodded during morning walks, maybe helped jump a battery if someone was stuck. But lately, people were stopping by more. Frank, you all right? Can't believe what they did to your pit. Let us know if you need anything. The tipping point came when Karen shut down the annual spring block party. Said it was too disruptive and the HOA had not approved the insurance policy. That party had been going on for 22 years. People were mad. You could feel it in the way folks stared at her during her daily power walks, the way conversations stopped when she passed, the way even her inner circle started to get quiet at meetings. Still, she pushed. And then she crossed a line even HOA politics couldn't hide. She had someone cut down the oak tree in my backyard, said the roots were encroaching on communal space, claimed it was a safety issue. That oak had been there longer than I'd been alive. I'd carved my wife's initials into it when we first moved in, buried my dog under it, tied up swings for my grandkids. And one day I came home from the hardware store and found it gone. Nothing but a stump and a note taped to my back door that read, "Tree removed per Section 7B, HOA authorization granted, you're welcome." That was it. No apology. No warning. No respect. Karen had taken the pit, the gas, the power, and now the tree. But more than that, she'd taken the last place on my property that still felt like home. And something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to write letters. I wasn't going to plead at the next meeting. No, ma'am, it was time to remind Karen and the whole damn neighborhood who I was, and just how hot things could get when you mess with a man who knows his way around fire. They say every man's got a breaking point. Mine wasn't when they fined me, wasn't when they shut off my gas, wasn't even when they took down my oak tree like it was some weed. It was the day I looked around and realized I'd let them take too much. My space, my peace, my damn voice. So I did what any self-respecting Southern pitmaster with a reputation and a bone to pick would do. I called up every cook I knew from the old circuit. Boys, I said, hey, it's time to light it up. Within 48 hours, word spread like wildfire. Frank Dalton's backyard BBQ revival. One day only, open invitation. I didn't need permits. I wasn't selling anything. This was a private gathering on my property with invited guests. You'd be amazed what kind of legal maneuvering a retired firefighter with a lawyer niece and a chip on his shoulder can figure out. By Friday morning, my backyard looked like the state fair met a military operation. Smokers on trailers, brisket rubs in buckets, spice kits stacked like ammo crates. We had teams from Savannah, Macon, even a guy who drove 6 hours from Alabama with a custom-built reverse flow rig named Lucille. Joe and the other neighbors, they brought chairs, tables, potato salad, coolers full of sweet tea and lemonade. Someone set up speakers and started playing Johnny Cash. Kids ran around with little flags. It looked like America threw a block party and forgot to invite the HOA. Then came the meat, ribs, brisket, pulled pork, smoked turkey legs, bacon-wrapped jalapeno poppers, and Lord have mercy, the peach-glazed pork belly from Big Earl's team made 2 grown men cry. At 2 p.m., I stepped up on a cinder block stage we built out back and tapped the mic. Folks, I said, thank you all for coming. Some people think they can silence tradition with rules and red tape, but they forgot something important. I turned to the camera because, yes, we were streaming this thing live. They forgot you don't mess with a man who knows how to feed a crowd. Applause, cheers. Somebody popped open a root beer like it was champagne. Then came the cherry on top. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, I got one more thing for y'all. I reached into an old metal box and pulled out a stack of glossy certificates. Real deal, notarized permits from the Georgia Department of Agriculture. I've been a licensed food safety handler since 1908, certified by the state, inspected annually. That pit Karen tore down, built to code and registered. The smoker trailer, tagged and insured. Every violation she hit me with, baseless. Every fine appealed in pending investigation. The crowd got quiet. Turns out, I said, when you try to bury a man with lies, you better not forget he knows how to dig. Right on cue, my niece, God bless her, stepped up and handed me a fat envelope. Inside, a formal complaint filed with the county and a class action letter signed by 27 homeowners against the HOA. Turns out Karen had been skimming funds for beautification projects, hiring her nephew's landscaping company at triple the going rate, and quietly passing policy changes without proper quorum. Folks had had enough. Someone shouted, "Get her up here, let her answer for it." But Karen didn't show. She'd been watching from behind her curtains, fuming like an overboiled kettle. That is, until a Channel 5 news van pulled up. And then, she vanished. That evening, as the sun went down and the smoke from 15 grills hung in the air like holy incense, we all sat around in lawn chairs, full-bellied and smiling. Joe leaned over and said, "You didn't just cook today, Frank. You baptized this damn street." And he was right. We didn't just flip burgers. We flipped the power structure. The Monday after the cook-off felt different. The air smelled cleaner, not because the smoke was gone, but because something foul had finally been lifted off the neighborhood. For the first time in 3 years, I stepped onto my porch and didn't feel watched. No Karen standing across the street with a camera phone, no snide glances, just birds chirping and the quiet hum of sprinklers turning on like nothing had ever been wrong. But plenty had changed. Karen was officially removed from her position as HOA president within 72 hours of the cook-off. The board met in an emergency session, without her, and voted her out unanimously. Her name was taken off every group, every newsletter, and every digital document faster than you could say unethical conduct. The county launched an official investigation into her financial dealings, and according to the whispers at the hardware store, she might be facing charges for misappropriation of HOA funds. Her nephew's landscaping company shut down, and his fancy truck hasn't been seen since. Karen herself, she moved out 2 weeks later, didn't even hold a garage sale, just packed up in the middle of the night and left behind a power wash driveway and a reputation in ashes. Meanwhile, things around Cedar Ridge started coming back to life. Joe organized the spring block party, rescheduled, renamed, and now featuring a new annual tradition, the Frank Dalton Smoke and Song Festival. What started as a rebellion turned into a movement. Local musicians played under the old pecan tree, families brought dishes to share, and I fired up the brand new pit my neighbors helped build. Bigger, better, and legal as all get out. We held a dedication ceremony for the oak tree stump. I planted a sapling in its place and placed a small stone at the base etched with Sarah's name and the words, "Love like smoke never really disappears." Folks cried at that part, me included. The HOA? Well, it still exists, but with a new board, new rules, and a new attitude. Meetings are open and transparent. Community votes matter again. They even added a rule requiring board members to complete a basic civics class before taking office. Imagine that, common sense making a comeback. The real magic, though, wasn't in the bylaws or the boardroom. It was in the way neighbors started talking again, helping each other, borrowing sugar, sharing garden tools, watching each other's kids. All the little things that made this place feel like home before control got in the way of connection. As for me, I still fire up the smoker every Sunday, still pour 2 glasses of sweet tea, and now I've got company. Sometimes it's Joe and his grandkids. Sometimes it's a new neighbor dropping by for a plate of pulled pork. Sometimes it's a local high schooler asking for tips on how to start their own smoker. And every once in a while, I see a stranger drive by slow, windows down, catching the smell of brisket in the air. They always smile. Because that smell, it ain't just meat and fire. It's freedom. It's tradition. It's the soul of a man who refused to be pushed off his own porch. I used to think Sarah was the only reason I kept that pit going. But I've come to realize now it was bigger than her, bigger than me. It was about community, about standing your ground when something good and simple is under threat by folks who forgot what good and simple even means. Justice didn't show up with a siren. It came slow, like smoke rising from oak coals, quiet but sure, and it tasted like home. If you're part of an HOA or thinking of joining one, I've got one thing to say to you. Don't forget who your neighbors are. A homeowner isn't a box to manage, a violation to fine, or a lawn to judge. A neighbor is a living, breathing story. They've got memories in those walls, grief in their garden, laughter built into every crack of that back porch. Rules are fine. Heck, they're necessary sometimes. But when rules become weapons, when meetings turn into little kingdoms, when power becomes more important than people, that's when the rot sets in. HOAs were meant to protect communities, not to control them. They were built to help folks feel safe, supported, and heard, not silenced, bullied, and fined into submission. When a single person or a clique of clipboard commandos starts treating tradition like a threat and personal choice like a crime, that's when the whole thing breaks down. Here's what I learned. You don't need a title to lead. You don't need a badge to serve your neighbors. You just need backbone and maybe a good smoker. Karen thought she could wipe out 30 years of memories with a demolition order. What she didn't realize is community doesn't live in brick and mortar. It lives in people who show up, people who speak out, and people who fire up the grill when things get cold. She tried to erase the soul of this neighborhood. Instead, she reminded us how much we needed it back. So if you're in a community like mine, or maybe you're dealing with your own Karen, remember this. Speak up before it's too late. Protect the spaces that bring people together. And never let policy replace plain old decency. And if you're someone sitting on a board somewhere, sipping coffee while writing up another petty violation, maybe it's time you ask yourself, are you leading a community or are you just ruling a kingdom of silence? Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with a nightmare HOA? Ever had to fight for something that mattered, no matter how small it seemed to others? Or maybe you're part of an HOA that gets it right, where people still wave from their porches and settle things with handshakes, not hearings. Drop your stories in the comments. I'll be reading every one of them. Let's show the world that good neighbors still exist, and sometimes all it takes to bring them together is a little smoke, a little spice, and a whole lot of heart.